Let's just put your hand over your eyes. I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. Now, if you put your hand over your ears, I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. Now you just put your hand over your heart and extend your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that friendship is a good idea in the mind of God. Friendship is a good idea in the mind of God. You know, we were made for friends and relationship. We were hardwired to be in relationship with one another. Jesus, when he was asked, what's the meaning of life, Jesus? He said it's relationship. It's relationship. It's learning how to relate to God. It's learning how to relate to one another. And perhaps most importantly, it's learning how to relate and make friends with ourselves. Relationship is the meaning of life. It's the curriculum. You know, the universe has left us many curriculums in order for us to get closer to our own divinity, to get closer to our true selves. One of those curriculums is abundance. One of those curriculums is health. One of those curriculums is creativity. And one of those curriculums is relationships. You don't get out of that curriculum. You don't get out of any of those curriculums. Nor do you get out of the curriculum of relationship. You know, there's a story in which a mouse is up in the attic and she's got 5 babies and she's just watching her babies play and she's just enjoying an afternoon. The sun's in and she's watching her babies play. And all of a sudden a ferocious cat jumps out in front of the babies. And she jumps in front of her babies between her and the cat, the babies and the cat, and she starts to bark. And the cat gets scared and runs away. And she turns to her babies and says, now you understand the importance of learning a second language. You and I have to learn a second language, and that's the language of love. That's the language of love. And anytime we learn a second language at a deeper level, we struggle with it a little bit. Take some time to do it. We make mistakes when we learn a second language, and so it is with the language of love. But you and I have the capacity. We have the capacity to be spiritually bilingual. We have the capacity to totally speak full-out human language, and we have the capacity to speak deep, loving language. But we have to work at it. We have to begin to learn how to do it. Because here's what happens. When we're learning how to speak fully human language and spiritual language, and learning how to develop the capacity to also receive loving and human language, it takes us time. And often we're closer to speaking human being language than we are loving language. I want to read a story that sets up how this happens to us, that we become closer to speaking human being language. It's a story written by Alan Cohen in one of his books. And he says it's a true story. When I was in the 9th grade, I had a crush on a cute girl named Donna. She was from Milltown and wore braces, so I figured she was in my range. About that time, I went to see a live Beatles concert in Atlantic City, and Donna was eager to hear about it when I returned. Wanting to impress her, I created an incredibly exciting drama about how I met the Beatles. I told her that a friend of ours knew the exit through which the Beatles were going to make their getaway after the concert. And as the story went, my friends and I hurried out the back door of the theater to catch them on their way out. Sure enough, as the music stopped, the door opened. Then John, Paul, George, and Ringo scurried into a long black limousine, but not before we intercepted them. We stretched out our hands, hoping to shake theirs, hoping to make some contact. While the 3 of the Beatles slipped past us, Paul McCartney extended his hand to me, And with a quick handshake after which he was done, I looked into the palm and I found the pick of his guitar. Donna was in awe. Her jaw had dropped inches and her eyes were open like two full moons. She definitely was impressed. This story was working. Now, not only did he give the pick, the story went, but I just happened to have it with me. Would you like to see it? Oh my God, Donna said, yes. The girl almost fainted. I took out the pick and out of my wallet and I showed it to her. Oh, she said, and to prove it was real, there, etched in the plastic, were the initials PM. It was almost too much for her to handle. Of all the girls in the school, she was getting to see it. And as if that were not enough, I told her quite sincerely, I wanted her to have it. You really mean it? Well, yes, it's special to me. She held the pick up next to her heart, swooned, and floated off to the next class. Ecstasy in junior high. During the next Donna held the pick next to her heart. She was gone, but not the story. Of course, was donkey dust. The pick was brought by me at a local music store. I had etched the initials in that morning before I went to school. It was one whopper of a tale, skillfully fabricated by yours truly. But the story didn't end there, folks. Donna told her friends and mine, and long before the news spread all around the school. By the end of the school day, lots of kids were asking me about this famous encounter. And not wanting to disappoint them, I gave them a detailed accounting of the exciting event. In fact, every time I told the story, it actually got a little more delicious with details. It got longer in length, longer in drama. I tell you, I could have been a fisherman. And after a while, an interesting thing happened. I told this story so much and colored it with such fascinating details that I began to believe it myself. The more I told it, the more real it became. And after a while, I forgot that it really never happened. I look back on that story now, and it seems as real to me in my memory as if it actually did happen. You and I do that as well. We have these stories that we've told over and over and over again, and we've convinced ourselves of their truth. We do it in a deeper, broader way. We tell the stories of our imperfections. We tell the stories of our limitation. We tell the stories of our difficulties. We tell the stories of how somebody hurt us in the past. We tell the story of how we grew up and we didn't have enough. We tell the story of limitation so often and with such juicy detail that we forget that it's not the truth of who we are. We forget that a lot of it didn't even happen that way when we look at it with grown-up eyes. We forget that even that part of it that did happen doesn't define us now. That we are much more than any story we could have thought up. But we've told that story so many times, that script so many times. You know, we are whole, perfect, and complete people right now. But we don't identify with that. That's our spiritual work, is to identify with that at least as much as the story, until we can get to more even than the story. You know, if you go to a store, some stores, they'll have an as-is table. You know, and if you buy something off the as-is table, you know something's wrong with it, don't you? You know the zipper isn't quite right, or there's a blemish in the cloth, or there's a little tear somewhere. And you also know that if you buy it off that table, you're not getting any refund. You cannot take it back. No matter how much whining you do, no matter how much talking you do, you're not taking it back because you're not getting a refund. Sometimes, here's what I think we do. I think we walk around with big as-is signs on our forehead. As is. Poor self-esteem. As is. Slight problem with commitment. As is. A total whack job. Stay away. See? What if we began to turn that around and walked with thee as is, whole, perfect, and complete. Because once we do that, we begin to attract to us the language of love. The bilingual language of love. We stay away from the story. We stop talking about the human story and we start talking about the true story with love. We can even look right past the difficulties that are there. We can look past the as is on our forehead and just see love. You know, the Dalai Lama says that he has sacred friendships, and those sacred friends are all from the Chinese government. Those are his sacred friends. And when he's asked to tell us more about why they're his sacred friends, because they are the oppressors of what he's trying to do in the world, and they oppress in a very mean way. He said, no, they're my sacred friends, because what they do is they call me forth to speak the language of love. They call the compassion out of me. In fact, without that, I don't know if I'd be as compassionate as I am. They make me speak the language of love, the language of the divine. Those of you who are Christians know that Mother Teresa, she would say, I'm married to my Lord Jesus. And then she would go out on her day and she would say, beloved, how interesting you look today to me. Beloved, what disguise you have brought forth this day. And she never looked at the conditions. And you and I can do that too. Well, I'm not Mother Teresa. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. You are Mother Teresa. You can look through that and under those conditions and train yourself. See, we call it spiritual practice for a reason. You have to practice seeing past the conditions and speaking the language of love. And a funny thing happens when you speak the language of love. It's returned to you. It's returned to you. You begin to hear it and receive it. Friends are a good idea in the mind of God. We're all in this curriculum together. I want to talk about 6 really simple things that you can do to kind of work with your relationships, to make them deeper. Okay? Now, there are 6 things that you know. You don't need to come to church. I'm so glad you did. But you didn't need to come to church to learn these 6 things. You've told them to other people. You've probably taught them to your own children. But I never think it hurts to come to church on a Sunday and be reminded of that which is obvious. So the first thing is this. The first spiritual practice we can do in this curriculum of learning to relate to one another is leave our poisonous friends behind with gentleness. With gentleness. Now, I'm not talking about friends you have a little irk time with. I'm not talking about friends who hurt your feelings. I'm talking about friends who over and over and over and over again put you down. Over and over and over again disappoint you. Those are the kinds of friends that I'm saying for us to leave behind. Now, I'm not saying to leave them behind in a huff. I'm not saying to get mad at them. I'm not saying to create a big drama so that you can leave. I'm saying just gently leave them behind in love. They're not bad. You're not bad. Nobody's bad. It's just not healthy for you anymore. Those of us in recovery, we know we had to leave good friends behind in order to grow and go forward in our lives. Some of us have had to leave good friends behind because they couldn't get on board with our beloveds. If we're in a marriage or a relationship and they were all about getting up in your stuff, you had to just gently leave them behind. It's an option. Remember that it's an option. I love to hear what kids say about prayers, and I came across a good one that helps me is mindful of this. Our Father who art in heaven, how did you get my name? Forgive us this day our trash baskets as we forgive those who trash basket against us. But the best is, and deliver us from people. See, we have to be able to be delivered from those people who aren't good for us. The second one is to be yourself, be your authentic self. You bring God onto the planet no way other than anybody else can bring it onto the planet. You are unique. And if you do not bring your authentic self to the game, you're not bringing God on to the planet. Being our authentic self is so, so powerful. And isn't that what we want when we have deep friendships? We want the authentic one. We don't want Eddie Haskell. We want the authentic person. Some of you are so young. Who's that? I don't know exactly who it is, but it's somebody you don't want to be like, okay? I love this story about, it comes from the Jewish tradition, about the man who went to heaven and said, I tried to be as smart as Solomon. All my life I tried to be, I didn't make it, but I tried to be as smart as Solomon, just like him. And he said, and then I tried to be as brave as David, and I didn't always make it, but I always tried to be just like David. And St. Peter said, well, you can't come in, you have to go back, because you forgot to be yourself. You forgot to be yourself. You are exactly what God wanted you to be. Hallelujah. Be it. Be it. The third one is to invest time. We treat our friends like they're our umbrellas. We just put them on the little umbrella rack until it starts raining, and then we get our friends back out. Take time with your friends. And it's hard. I know. Some of them, we're in relationships. We have children. We have jobs. It's hard to squeeze some time in for your friends. It's part of the curriculum. It's part of what brings you closer to your own divinity. The fourth one is to make sure you're in a friendship that's reciprocal. It's reciprocal. You're not always you're not always trying to make plans. You're not always doing the phone calling. You're not always trying to do everything. But it's a reciprocal friendship. Now, if it's not a reciprocal friendship, you don't need to get mad at them. You just need to widen your circle so that you have more friends. And you can deepen those friends that want to play with you, that want to be with you. The fifth one is communicate, and it's probably the most important one here. We need to learn how to communicate with our friends better. It's too easy to just either let things slide until they get huge or to not say anything ever at all. It's important that we communicate with our friends, that we talk about the tough stuff, that we honor that friendship by talking about the things that are difficult. It's also important that we understand that in order to speak the language of love, as opposed to the language of humanity, the language of conditions, we have to be non-judgmental. You have to let your friends do their thing, even though you don't agree with it, even though you don't approve of it. You don't have to say every little thing that came into your mind about your friend's plans. Remember that everything is purposeful. Remember when we finally got to the affirmation, we were reminded that everything is purposeful. It's purposeful. And their journey is purposeful, even though it may bring them heartache later on. Now, if they're actually going to do themselves some harm, you want to sit down with them and explore the consequences. But you don't have to tell them what's going to happen and that you don't agree with them and you're going to do this and that. Just let it be. We had a situation in which one of the women in our foundations class had a phone call from a friend who said, you know what, I'm done with you. I don't want to be friends with you anymore. Now, in her mind, she was letting go of a poisonous relationship. In her friend's mind, in our foundation student's mind, she said, no, I'm sorry. We've been friends too long. At least I get to know what the problem is. At least you have to talk to me about what's going on. And she forced her to do it, and they began to work it out. And it was a relatively small, easy thing to work out. But isn't that true in all of our fights with everybody? They're usually, when you boil them down, pretty easy things to work out. Communication. So the last one, thank God, is allow each other to grow. Allow each other to grow in your own way. And it goes back to, we don't have to force our way on anybody else. We don't have to force our opinion on what they're doing on anybody else. Most of you know that I once bought a restaurant because I thought the name Georgia O'Quiche was so cute. And I had friends, all kinds of friends, telling me what a stupid idea that was. And in fact, it was a totally ludicrous idea. But the learnings I got from that totally ludicrous idea set me on a path that made this church much more stable than it ever would have been. I want to finish by reading a wonderful story about friendship. And if I can't finish, then Tanya, you'll just run right up here and finish. Oh, you dig for your glasses. That's a good idea. One morning I was taking my regular jog around my neighborhood, and when a stray dog came up behind me. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see that the dog was small, mangy, and black. At first, I pushed myself forward, afraid the dog would bite me. But to my surprise, instead of biting me, the dog ran quickly by my side with a smile on his face. Suddenly, I was jogging on a path that I usually take alone. But now I was accompanied by this dog I'd never seen before. The dog ran beside me for a good 15 minutes or so until it ran off somewhere and disappeared. That was the last time I saw him. Now, he may have left me in the end, but at that moment he was running beside me. That dog made me feel less alone. In that moment, the dog was a true friend. He didn't want to bite me. He didn't want to bark at me. He didn't want a treat. He didn't want me to throw him a bone. He didn't want to jump ahead of me as if to beat me in a race. He didn't want to fall right behind me as if he depended on me to guide him to the next point. No, he just wanted to be with me. And I think that's what true friendship is. Friendship is an old mangy dog who joins you on a morning jog simply because that's what you're doing, and it gives him great joy to share the ride. Yeah. So let's take this message into prayer, knowing that the presence and the power and the glory of God is running through us and every single person right now, as is. That every single being on this planet is worthy of our love language. It is worthy of us taking the time. We know that the curriculum of love is the true curriculum to get us back to the divine place we're in. I give thanks for this. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.